informative. Power Breakfast with TT on Power 98.7.
So, in the midst of a vast wave of what appears to be milder infections, countries around the world are now dialing back on restrictions and softening their messaging around COVID-19. There's a growing sentiment among citizens around the world and here at home that we are past the worst of the pandemic. Medical experts say there is a lot of happy talk that goes along the lines that Omicron is a mild virus and it's effectively functioning as an unattenuated live vaccine that's going to create massive herd immunity across the globe. Well, just how true is all of this, and how should we be processing this information about where we are with the virus? Pleased to welcome on the line Professor Salim Abdool Karim. Of course, he's the director of the Center for the AIDS Program for Research in South Africa, and he's an epidemiologist. Thank you. So good to be talking to you again, Prof. Good morning.
Good morning, TT. Good to hear from you, and very good morning to all of the listeners.
So what is this message, Professor, that we should be taking in terms from what government has been saying to us? We are now hearing, of course, of the imminent removal of the national state of disaster, which is not in itself got anything to do necessarily with the science of the virus. But what certainly the scientists have been telling us is that Omicron, that we've just come out of a fourth wave of, which was the dominant variant, certainly while being highly infectious, seems to have been not led to any serious disease or cases of the disease. What are we supposed to make of it? Are we really past the worst?
So when we look at this coronavirus, we understand that it's an evolving situation. In other words, that each variant is different and that we are seeing the waves upon waves of infection. And during the period between the waves, which is roughly about 3 months, we have a period where, call it like a short honeymoon period, that we can ease restrictions without of risk. And so we, in response to the way in which we understand this virus and the way it's changing and the waves as they come and go, we need to adapt to that. In that we need to use this 3-month period that we have to maximize our opportunities. But we also need to remember that we have to prepare for the next wave. So even though we'll ease restrictions now, we have to be ready that we may have to implement additional restrictions when the next wave hits with a new variant.
I wonder, how do I phrase this now? I mean, is it safe to assume that even if we do have any variants, any new variants or further new variants, that they will be like Omicron, those that will only lead to mild forms of disease? In other words, is it safe to assume that we are never going to see a return to Delta, which is so devastated or decimated the world?
You are asking a really important question, TT. And there's a very common misconception here. And that misconception is that now all the future variants are going to be very mild. That's a misconception. Let me explain that for a second. What we know is that until Omicron, when we had Alpha, Beta, Delta, Gamma, all of these 4 variants, as we encountered each wave, the waves got worse. In other words, Beta was worse than the ancestral strain. Delta was worse than Beta. There were more cases, there were more hospitalizations, there were more deaths in each of them. So the virus was steadily getting worse and worse. Omicron has changed that. Omicron has come in. It's a much milder virus, and there's very clear evidence now that Omicron is much more efficient in infecting the cells of your nose. It's about 70 times more efficient in infecting the nose cells, but it's much less efficient in infecting the lung cells. It's about 10 times less efficient than Delta in infecting the lung cells. So what we're seeing in Omicron is a virus that spreads very fast, but doesn't cause as much severe disease. It still causes severe disease, but much less so. So the question now is, what's the next variant going to look like?
Right.
So I need to explain, quite important for your viewers to be aware, that each variant doesn't come from the previous variant. In other words, Omicron didn't come from Delta. Beta didn't come from,
They're not necessarily related to one another.
They are unrelated. They are each created independently of each other. So we don't know what the next variant is going to look like. We are hoping that it will look more like Omicron, but it could just as easily look more like Delta. There is no way to predict what the next variant is. For example, nobody predicted that we would see Omicron. No one, because there was no way to predict that. And it's the same situation. We don't know what the next variant will look like. So we have to plan for the next variant that it could be worse, could be more like Delta, but we're hoping it will be more like Omicron. But we shouldn't be confused, that we shouldn't let our hope be confused as being the reality, because it's not so. We don't know the truth.
Got you. Yeah. And what about the messaging around vaccines, whether mask wearing, although the minister seemed to indicate that masks will definitely continue to be, and as well as sanitizing and all of that, will continue to be a part of our regime as far as fighting COVID-19 is concerned. But it seems to me like we're going to face an even tougher task convincing people to take the vaccine if there's an impression that's out there that, the new COVID, if I can call it that, in reference to the newer variant, the latest variants, are not that bad. So it's okay, you can do without this, the vaccines.
Well, when you think about the vaccines, when we first learned that they were effective, we learned that they were 95%, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, was 95% effective in preventing infection. But as new variants have come, the efficacy of the vaccine in preventing infection has declined. For example, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, that was 95% effective against the original virus, was only about 60% effective against the Delta variant for mild infections. But what's really important is that almost all of the vaccines, it doesn't matter which one we're talking about, and it doesn't matter which variant we are talking about, the vaccines are really good. They are highly effective in preventing severe disease and hospitalization, as high as 80%, 90% in some instances. So there is a real benefit to being vaccinated. Now, when you've got enough people vaccinated, then you now are not too concerned that your hospitals are going to get overwhelmed. So we need to get to 60, 70% vaccinated, because when we do, then we can start doing what other countries are doing, which is to ease restrictions. Because you ease restrictions, you're not overly concerned that the hospitals will become overwhelmed if a new virus comes, because you've got your population vaccinated and protected. Now, we in this country have lost the plot a little bit because our vaccination rates are still too low. That means that we'll ease restrictions, but we still have a bit of risk because we don't know what the next variant will look like. So it's very important that we reinvigorate our vaccination and try to get more people vaccinated so that we can ease restrictions more confidently.
And as far as those vaccines are concerned, just a quick one to conclude with, do you anticipate that we will have to keep getting booster shots on an annual basis, in pretty much the same way as happens with the flu vaccine, where you have to take it every year?
So I don't think that the evidence points entirely in that direction. What the evidence shows is that taking a third dose is important. That, yes, take a third dose. Please go and take a booster shot. That's really important. and that's what's more highly effective against Omicron. What's not clear is whether a fourth dose or a fifth dose will be required. I think we can look forward to a future where we will likely see a new generation of COVID-19 vaccines, maybe by the end of the year or early next year. And that new generation of vaccine will be different in that it will cover a much broader range of the viruses. And so we hope. So I would say it's too early to say that, we're going to be taking many doses. We do need the first 3 doses. That much is clear. What's for the future, we'll wait to see what the next generation vaccines are.
All right. Professor Salim Abdool Karim, always good to speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
It's a pleasure, TT.
Yeah, so Professor Salim Abdool Karim is an epidemiologist and the director of the Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa. Also, he used to head up the National COVID-19 Advisory Committee.
Power traffic.
Thanks, TT. A very good morning.